Happy Monday, and welcome back to the Lorden Arts channel. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. Case Cracked is the show where we look into a mystery and what are the critical pieces that help solve that mystery. Today's case was suggested by longtime brain scratcher Cortre and is called Life and Fake Death. Samuel Israel III was born into a life of wealth and influence. Early in American history, the Israel family established themselves as wealthy traders of sugar, cocoa, and coffee. In the 1970s, his grandfather, Samuel Israel, started a small commodities trading firm in New York and eventually built it into ACLI International, a firm that he sold for over $40 million in 1981. At the age of 16, Israel's family moved from New York to Louisiana, and after he finished private school, he attended Tulane University, but never received a degree. In 1982, he chose to enter into the family business and work as a trader on Wall Street. Throughout the 80s and early 90s, he worked with some of the greats in trading, learning as much as he could from men like billionaire Leon Cooperman of the multi-billion-dollar hedge fund Omega Partners. He also admits to heavily abusing alcohol and cocaine during this period. In 1995, he decided it was time to start his own business, and the following year had started Bayou Hedge Fund Group in Stamford, Connecticut. Hedge funds act as a type of financial partnership that uses pooled funds from a group of investors. The group then employs different strategies, including some high-risk methods, such as investing aggressively, hoping to receive large gains in return. The buy-in for these investments are high and generally only available to the most wealthy of accredited investors. With only his family name and the contacts Samuel Israel III had made in the industry, Bayou raised over $300 million. Quote, "I am a rooted person. I am of this industry. Trading is in my blood." In the years to come, the hedge fund group soared above others in the industry, always turning a profit no matter what state the market was in. Israel, a divorced father of two, lived a half hour away in Mount Kisco, New York, where he paid tens of thousands of dollars a month to rent a house from Donald Trump. Everything in Bayou's offices were the latest in high-tech equipment. The trading floor was described as lavish and even sported different types of exotic snakes. All of this would come to an abrupt end almost 10 years later, when in July of 2005, Israel announced that he planned to close the firm and distribute its funds to the investors. In August, Silver Creek Capital Management still had not received their check and tried to contact Bayou for their $53 million. Israel assured his investors that their check was in the mail and then cut off all contact with everyone. As time went by, none of the investors received the checks they were promised. Fearing the worst, Silver Creek flew a representative to Stamford to confront Israel. When he arrived, he received no answer at the front door. He walked around the back to find that door open. He found no one inside. The offices were completely deserted. As he looked around, he found something astonishing. On the desk of Bayou's chief financial officer, Dan Marion, sat a 6-page typed, single-spaced confession letter. In it, he claimed that Bayou had been defrauding its investors right from the very beginning. Israel, he claimed, had been running a Ponzi scheme. Each new investor to Bayou only served to pay existing investors and help Israel continue to live his lavish lifestyle. After police were called, they learned from the letter that from 1996 to 2005, trading losses cost Bayou almost $55 million. How could they hide this from investors? By creating their own accounting firm that would perform their own audits, hiding any losses. Over the course of 6 days in July of 2004, Israel withdrew Bayou's $161 million, an amount much smaller than the $400 million he claimed was there to investors, and began distributing the funds into different bank accounts in different countries in an effort to hide the money that he had now stolen. Marino ended his confession letter with a goodbye, claiming that he had been a pawn in Israel's schemes, just like the investors. Quote, "If there is a hell, I will be there for eternity. I am sorry," he wrote. "I know God will have no mercy on my soul." Fearing the worst, police began to search the site for Marino's body. Within hours, police found him. Amazingly, he was still alive and at his home. He quickly agreed to tell them everything and assist them in capturing and prosecuting Israel. When news of Bayou's deception hit newspapers, Israel contacted authorities through his attorneys and turned himself in. In September of 2005, the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission filed a complaint filled with allegations of fraud and misappropriated funds on the part of Bayou, Israel, and Marino. That same month, Israel pleaded guilty to 3 counts of federal investor and mail fraud. The next year, as Bayou filed for bankruptcy, Israel's attorney pleaded with the court for leniency, claiming Samuel had become addicted to painkillers after many back surgeries and took a litany of pills for bipolar disorder, depression, and anxiety. He had also been fitted with a pacemaker due to poor heart health. The court wasn't moved, and Israel eventually pleaded guilty to charges of conspiracy, investor fraud, and mail fraud. On April 14, 2008, he and Marion were both given a 20-year sentence. Israel was also ordered to pay $300 million to the investors that he had defrauded, receiving one of the harshest punishments for a white-collar crime since Enron's collapse back in 2007. The court allowed Israel to remain free until his incarceration date to allow him to put his affairs in order. He was told to surrender himself at 2 p.m. on June 9, 2008. By noon on the 9th, police were called to the Bear Mountain Bridge on the Hudson River. Israel's 2006 GMC Envoy had been found abandoned on the shoulder. The keys were found in the vehicle, along with a bottle of pills. Written in the dust on the hood was the phrase, "Suicide is painless." Fearing Israel had taken his own life to avoid prison, rescue boats were sent out to find his body, but found nothing. Officers knew that a fall from the bridge would have been fatal. Within days, they began to doubt that Israel had jumped. With little effort, they found that the phrase written on the hood of his car was actually a reference to the television show MASH. The theme song is actually titled "Suicide is Painless," and the movie that the show was based on featured a character called Painless who faked his own death. When Israel's girlfriend, a woman named Deb Ryan, was questioned, she stated that he had planned to drive himself to prison to start his sentence, but she didn't have any reasonable explanation on where he planned to leave his SUV during his 20 years in prison. At the end of the week, U.S. Marshals had issued wanted posters, and Israel's case was featured on America's Most Wanted. The case finally broke when CCTV footage from the bridge was examined. It showed a car pulling up alongside the SUV at the time of his disappearance. When the driver of the car was found, they admitted that they had picked Israel up on the bridge and took him to a nearby rest area, where he had a fully stocked RV that he planned to flee and hide in. When investigators went back and questioned Ryan with their new evidence, she quickly broke down. She stated that she had helped Israel pack the RV the night before he disappeared, but had no knowledge of his whereabouts. She was quickly charged with aiding and abetting his escape and then released on bail. By the start of July, pressure had mounted on television, through media outlets, and with federal and state authorities. As the investigation reached its peak on July 2nd in Southwick, Massachusetts, a man drove up to the police station on a motor scooter. To their surprise, Israel entered and surrendered himself. He simply walked up to the front desk and told the officer, "I'm supposed to go to jail." When questioned, he claimed that his girlfriend's arrest had prompted his return. What Israel didn't know was that his mother had been helping authorities since his disappearance and had also helped to convince him to surrender himself to them. She was actually on the phone with Israel as he walked into the police station. He went on to state that, yes, he had staged his own death on the bridge, but had actually tried to end his life while on the run by swallowing a bottle full of morphine, which didn't work. After he fled, he had spent his time 100 miles away at a $40 a night campground in Granville, where he stayed in the RV. From there, Israel was taken back into custody and held until his new sentencing on July 15, 2009, when he was ordered to serve not only his original sentence of 20 years, but an additional 2 years for fleeing. His girlfriend was sentenced to 3 years probation for her part in his disappearance. Sam Israel is now serving his sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution, Butner Low, in North Carolina. His earliest release date will be in 2027. As for the money he stole from investors, $100 million was found by regulators in an Arizona bank, but the rest is still yet to be accounted for. Case cracked. I would like to thank Reuters.com, FindLaw.com, BusinessInsider.com, NBC News, and the New York Times, New York Magazine, CNBC.com, and of course, Christy Arnhart for researching and writing up today's case. And here she is to discuss it with us now. Christy, did you know that the MASH song actually had lyrics?
No.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
And they're very dark. I mean, obviously from the name, it's not good. It's not a great song. It's interesting because I had never seen the film, obviously. I mean, I was kind of too young for it, but the TV show, I mean, it was huge when I was a kid. It was the type of thing that, families were sitting around. If I remember right, I think the final episode held the record for the largest TV event for like years and years and years. I mean, MASH was huge. And everyone knew the song, but most of us only knew the instrumental version. We didn't know about the actual lyrics and the title of Suicide is Painless. But then I really appreciate that you worked into the script that there was actually a character and that this character kind of fakes their own, it's just...
Yeah. And he just basically gave them a roadmap to what he did.
Yeah. It always amazes me when criminals kind of copy an idea from popular culture like that, and it happens pretty frequently. We talk about it on the Crime After Crime podcast occasionally there. You mentioned that there's some discrepancies in terms of the amount of money lost?
Yes, a lot of the articles that I saw said there was 300 million. Then some others say 400 million. There's even discrepancies on the amount that he paid rent to Donald Trump on his house. Some say 25,000, some say 35,000.
Okay.
I don't know about the house, but as far as the large sum of money that disappeared, I honestly don't think it's out there. I think he blew that.
Yeah, it would seem like it. I mean, if he's going to go this far to try to run a scam like this, why is he going to leave any dollar to be taken back from other people? I mean, he's probably going to take as much as he can while it's actually going on.
And he was having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, unless he had some hope that, or maybe he had some hope that the Ponzi would never run out. I think that's part of the mentality of those pyramid schemes, and even things that aren't full-on Ponzi schemes, but like pyramid marketing and things like that, is they never recognize that there's a bottom. They never recognize that there's a point where you run out of new people. If you hit a pyramid, and even if it's popular enough to go across a whole nation, or let's say across the whole world, at some point the pyramid collapses because the bottom of it needs to be fed by new people. That's how it works. So pretty interesting. So we had kind of a weird twist in this. I always love the technology stuff, so I'm glad that you included this. You said that New York Magazine reports that Israel told investors he'd invented a computer program called forward propagation that had the quasi-mystical ability to foresee the future by a few seconds, or a tick. The program's indicators would then light up like a slot machine to make an investment recommendation, and was correctly precise 86% of the time, according to Israel.
Hey, if you've got those kind of odds, you got to use it, right?
Yeah, well, and what a great story. If I knew that some guy had a machine that could do that, would I invest in that hedge fund? Yeah, absolutely. But then you also continue when at this point, when he was talking about this program, I guess he was already down about 100 million when he was running around talking about that.
Yeah.
Another kind of interesting connection to technology on this. For those of you that are also fans of the Seriously Mysterious podcast out there, you might remember the episode we did on the last day of Danny Casolaro, and how that kind of leaned into a little bit of a conspiracy theory known as the octopus, and a program that was passed around, kind of appropriated by our government from the company that made it. But then the theory is that this program was given to other countries, and it had backdoors built into it so people could check on what was happening within those countries. That program is called Promise. And of course, with a guy like this, do you think he was aware of the Promise program? Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, it seems like he had discussions about it. He was once told about the program, and he said, quote, "If I had Promise, I could track the movement of money. I could see how the Fed operated. If money was going into semiconductors, then I could get there ahead of the market. The same for consumer goods or oil or gas. I would be at the flux point. I would slay the market. I was going to make so much money, it wouldn't even be fun. It would be the ultimate inside trade. That is just such a good piece of insight. That's why I wanted to include it with this episode, just to kind of let you know where this guy was coming from. First, he's talking about a program where it's predicting the future, and he's, laying that information around so people want to roll more money in his direction. But then talking about if he had access to this government program that could look into the operations of businesses all around the world, oh yeah, then he could definitely. But at no point is he actually doing what he's proclaiming to be able to do, which is put hedge funds together made of sound business strategies that are going to increase their value. And there are companies that do that. So it's really strange to me. This guy is he's like looking for the ultimate cheat at all times.
Yeah.
It's just such a big part of his personality. He actually wants to make money for a skill that he doesn't really seem to have.
It's quite a character.
It really seems like it. Yeah. Yeah. Is there a movie on this? Do you know?
There's not. There is a book based on it, though.
Okay. Yeah. Because I was going to say, with this type of character, like I could see you getting some A-lister Hollywood star and kind of writing a little bit of a comedic slant behind it and rolling with it.
Yeah. I would definitely watch that movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of comedic slant, what type of checks did he use?
This was my favorite. SpongeBob SquarePants.
Well, now I like the guy, so.
How can you, what he did was horrible, taking these people's money. But he was such a character, you can't help but laugh at some of this.
Yeah. And he's going to write you a check on a SpongeBob, on a picture of SpongeBob, and good luck trying to cash it.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. Well, Christy, thank you so much for all your help and time on this. We really appreciate you, and I've got some other people to thank right now. Thank you, PayPal supporters Stein Roger Solheim, Larissa Mertschink, Michael Park, Perlette Toussaint, Mark Witt, Hillary Green, and Kelly Joe from I Am Me. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit lordnarts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, or buy merchandise. Case Cracked is frequently demonetized by YouTube. But we know learning about the mechanisms that help support and find justice in these cases is important to understand the many unsolved cases that we also cover. So we really appreciate your support in allowing us to continue doing that. Remember, you can get another Lord and Art story every week on the Seriously Mysterious podcast. A new episode is coming tomorrow and every Tuesday after that. Visit seriouslymysterious.com and subscribe on your favorite podcatchers. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon down below if you'd like to catch one of our weekly secret live shows. And of course, I'll be back with a new unsolved mystery for you on Friday, right here on the Lord and Arts channel.